Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind carried grit through the dry grasslands outside of Red Hollow, and by sundown, Cora Ashford had lost everything but her name. The sheriff's voice had been flat when he said it. "You got 20 minutes to leave town, Miss Ashford. You helped the killer escape. That makes you no better." The townsfolk didn't argue. Some nodded. Some just looked away. Her boots crunched against the dirt as she walked out with her head high and her heart cracking in two. She had not known Eli was wanted for murder. He came in bleeding, desperate, saying he had been ambushed by highwaymen. She had stitched his side, fed him stew, let him sleep in her barn. The next morning, the sheriff rode in with a wanted poster and a shotgun. No one cared that she had saved lives before, that she had helped birth babies, comforted the dying, or taught the young ones to read in the back room of the chapel. She had helped the wrong man, and now no one would meet her eyes. By nightfall, she was miles out, riding the only thing she had left her bay mare, Maple. Her medical bag was strapped tight behind her saddle. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she was not going back. 3 days later, her water was nearly gone. Her lips cracked, her skin burned. But she kept riding through the wide, empty land, hoping for anything that felt like safe ground. It was near dusk when she saw the smoke. A small ranch sat at the edge of a valley, the house low and square, a few cattle scattered across the fields. She hesitated at the fence line, heart hammering. Then Maple took a step forward, and Cora let her. She knocked on the frame of the open barn door. A man looked up from a saddle he was repairing, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands rough and honest. He had eyes like a storm about to break blue, sharp and tired. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, faded but deep. "You lost?" he asked. "No," she said, though her voice cracked. "But I am thirsty." He stood, tall and lean, dust in his dark blonde hair. "Well, come in then. No sense dying on my land." She followed him to the well behind the barn. He pumped the handle, filled a tin cup, and handed it to her. Water spilled over her fingers as she drank. "Name's Porter O'Malley," he said finally. "This your horse?" "Yes." "You got a name?" "Cora Ashford." He nodded, quiet. "Well, Miss Ashford, you look like hell." She smiled faintly, wiping her mouth. "That sounds about right." He let her stay in the barn that night. She did not ask for more. The next morning, she rose with the sun, her back stiff from the hay, and found him already working. He was fixing a break in the fence, hammering boards with slow, steady rhythm. She picked up a hammer and joined him. "You do not have to help," he said. "I know, but I will." They said little. Just worked. When the fence was done, he handed her a biscuit and a strip of cured meat. "Why are you out here, Cora Ashford?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "I helped the wrong man. They banished me." He studied her, his face unreadable. "What kind of man?" "Wounded. Bleeding. Said he was robbed." I believed him. I stitched him up. Gave him food. Then the sheriff showed up. Porter took a breath, slow and deep. "You are not the first to trust someone who did not deserve it." "You ever do that?" she asked, curious. He nodded once. "Too many times." They worked together that day. And the next, she cleaned out his storeroom, organized supplies, cooked when he forgot to. He taught her how to ride fence, how to check for rustlers. She knew he was watching her, not with suspicion, but with something quieter, like he was trying to decide who she was under all that ache. On the fourth day, she heard the gunshot. It came from the hills east of the pasture. Porter was already running, rifle in hand. Cora grabbed her bag and followed. They found the boy near the creek, maybe 10 years old, a bullet in his leg, crying but alive. Porter knelt beside him. "Tobias, you stubborn mule," he muttered. "Where is your sister?" The boy choked out. "Tally's hiding." "Rocks. Up the draw." Porter looked up. "Stay with him," he told Cora. "I will get her." Cora pulled out her tools, heart pounding. "He is bleeding bad." "I trust you," Porter said. The words hit harder than they should have. She worked fast, cleaning and wrapping the wound, while murmuring to the boy, "Tobias." She kept his head in her lap, told him stories about horses and stars. He gripped her wrist tight. Porter came back with a girl clinging to his neck, dark-haired and wide-eyed, no more than 7. "They were out chasing rabbits," he said, breathless. "Ran straight into a rattler. Gun went off when the boy tried to shoot it." He looked at her then, something fierce in his eyes. "You saved him." Cora shook her head. You brought her back. We both did something right. That night, Porter invited her into the house. The children were asleep on a bedroll near the hearth. He handed her a cup of coffee. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. They yours? She asked. He nodded. My brother's kids. He died 2 years ago. Their mother ran off before that. You raised them alone? Yeah. She looked at the sleeping boy and girl. They are lucky to have you. He looked at her then, really looked. They are lucky to have you today. Cora's throat tightened. I do not belong anywhere anymore. Porter stepped closer. You helped the wrong man once. But you helped the right one today. He paused, voice low. Me. Her breath caught. I do not know what you are running from, he added. But maybe you could stop running here. Cora looked up at him, the firelight flickering across his face. Her voice was barely a whisper. You really mean that? I do. Then he touched her hand, gentle, solid. She did not pull away. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. Something true. She had been cast out, shamed, left behind. But here, in a house with sleeping children and a man who had seen enough pain to recognize it in someone else, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Home. Cora stepped into the rhythm of the land without asking what it would cost. Mornings began before light touched the horizon, and the air smelled of cold dew and cattle. She rose with the first rustle from the children's bedroll and set water to boil before Porter had even pulled his boots on. The quiet between them had changed, no longer cautious, but expectant, as though they both understood something had begun without deciding to start it. Tobias limped, but insisted on following Porter out to the pasture. You'll drag that leg open, Porter warned him, straightening the boy's hat. And you'll slow me down. I can sit on the fence and holler if I see anything, Tobias argued. Porter gave him a long look, then nodded. You holler loud then. Cora watched them ride off, the boy balanced behind his uncle, holding tight to the saddle horn. She turned back toward the house, Tally trailing her with a fistful of wildflowers clutched in one hand. Where'd you learn to sew up skin? The girl asked, skipping over a root. I trained under a doctor in Kansas when I was younger, Cora answered, pushing the door open. He let me observe surgeries, even let me stitch a few patients when his hands were too unsteady. Was he your husband? Tally asked, climbing onto a stool. No, he was just kind. Tally tilted her head. Is that why you helped that bleeding man? 'Cause you were taught to. Cora rinsed the basin and set it to dry. I helped him because he needed it. Sometimes that's the only reason you need. Tally nodded like she was memorizing it. Then she asked, Are you going to stay here forever? Cora paused, drying her hands. That's not mine alone to decide. That evening, Porter returned with a fresh cut across his palm. Full Steer kicked the gate into my hand. He muttered, blood dripping down his wrist. Cora didn't wait for permission. She wrapped her fingers around his and led him to the washstand. As she cleaned the wound, her brow furrowed. You should have let Tobias holler, she said, binding the bandage tight. I did, he said, watching her tie the knot. He hollers just fine. Didn't stop the steer. She glanced up, caught the quiet curve of his mouth, and let out a breath. You need stitches. Porter didn't flinch. Go on then. Her needle was already threaded. He held his hand steady, eyes on her face instead of the wound. She worked in silence, the room filled with the soft scrape of her thread-pulling skin. You said you trained under a doctor, he said after a moment. That wasn't common. No, she said. My father was a blacksmith. Said girls didn't belong near blood unless it was birthing or dying. But my mother had other notions. She sent me to town when I turned 15, said I had a mind steadier than most men. She was right, Porter said. Cora tied the final stitch. You didn't ask what happened in Red Hollow. I didn't need to, he said. But you wanted to. He nodded. I still do. She laid the needle aside and leaned back. They came to my door just after dawn. Said I'd harbored a man who robbed a stage and shot 2 deputies. I told them he'd said nothing of that. They didn't care. Said I was either a liar or a fool. Either way, I had no place among them. Porter flexed his hand, testing the bandage. You ever think he might have lied to you? I know he did, she said. But I also know what fear looks like. He wasn't cruel, just desperate. They were quiet again. Outside, the cattle lowed, and the wind brushed the shutters. You know what I think? Porter asked. Cora looked at him. I think you've got the kind of heart that doesn't ask what someone did before they show up bleeding. She swallowed. That's not always a good thing. No, he said. But it's rare. And I don't know that I'd trade rare for safe. Later, when the fire was down to coals and the children had fallen asleep, Cora stepped out onto the porch. Porter was already there, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands, the stars overhead wide and burning. I'm not asking for charity, she said quietly. You're not getting any, he answered. She turned to him. Then what am I getting? He looked at her, slow and sure. A place to build something that lasts. Cora folded her arms against the chill. And what if I stay, and it turns out I'm more trouble than I'm worth? I don't think you know what you're worth yet, Porter said. She didn't respond. Instead, she sat beside him, their shoulders not quite touching. Neither of them moved to close the space, but neither of them pulled away. The frost came early that year, curling along the window panes before October had fully set in. Cora stood at the stove stirring cornmeal into a pot. The sleeves of her dress rolled to her elbows. The morning was hushed except for the soft scrape of Tally arranging kindling by the hearth and the faint clatter of Tobias whittling outside. Porter had gone to check the upper pasture before light touched the valley. He hadn't said when he'd be back, but he never needed to. When Tally finished her task, she climbed onto the bench beside the table and leaned her chin on her arms. Will Mama come back now that it's cold? She asked. Cora set the spoon aside. Do you think she might? The girl shook her head slowly. Uncle says she left like a fox through a fence fast and quiet. He says we can't follow folks like that. Cora took a seat across from her. Sometimes people go because they don't know how to stay. Would you ever go like that? I don't believe so, Cora said. Not if I had a reason to stay. Tally didn't answer, but her small fingers reached across the table and touched Cora's hand before she slid off the bench and went to fetch her shawl. The stew simmered until midday, and Cora kept her mind busy mending a torn hem, scrubbing the water basin, stacking wood. When hoofbeats sounded near the barn, she stepped outside, brushing her hands on her skirt. Porter dismounted stiffly, his coat dusted with snow at the shoulders, and his jaw set like he'd had words with the wind. Snow's settled past the ridge, he said. We'll need to bring the herd down sooner than usual. She reached for the reins and led the horse toward the rail. Did you see tracks? He nodded. Cougar. Young one, but bold. Left claw marks on the east gate. Cora led the horse into the stall, then turned. I can take the shotgun and ride the west line tomorrow. If it's coming near the house, we ought to know. Porter leaned against the frame of the stall, quiet, watching her. You always offer before you're asked. Someone once told me you don't wait to be useful. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. That someone knew you well. She hung the bridle with care, then wiped her hands on a rag. There's stew inside. If you eat slow, it'll last long enough for me to finish the root cellar. I'll eat after, he said. I want to see how you stack potatoes. She glanced over her shoulder. You don't trust my method? I don't trust the mice, he said, following her toward the back of the house. The trapdoor to the cellar creaked as she lifted it. He passed down the basket, then climbed in after her. The air was cool and still, the walls lined with shelf boards hammered rough and uneven. Cora crouched, laying the potatoes in rows, careful not to let the skins touch. Where'd you learn to do this? Porter asked, kneeling beside her. I spent 3 winters on a claim outside Council Grove. The woman who taught me said a cellar's only useful if you treat it like a ledger, every row neat, every root counted. He ran a hand along the edge of the shelf. You always talk about where you've been. You never say much about what you hoped for. She finished setting the last row and sat back on her heels. I hope for steady work. A place where I could use my hands and not be questioned for it. And now, she met his eyes. Now I hope for mornings where I don't wake wondering where I'll have to go next. He sat still, his shoulders brushing the dirt-packed wall. I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to find anyone worth trusting again. A long silence unfolded between them, not awkward, not strained, just weighty with everything unspoken. Then Porter reached for her hand, calloused against calloused, and held it like it was something known. You've given these kids more peace in 2 weeks than they've had in 2 years, he said. And me, too, if I'm honest. She didn't pull away. Then maybe I'm where I belong. When they climbed out of the cellar, the light was fading, and the first snowflakes were falling soft and slow. Tally had set 2 plates on the table, her dolls tucked into a basket nearby, and Tobias was nodding off by the hearth, a half-finished whistle in his hand. Cora ladled stew into bowls while Porter added another log to the fire. When he sat beside her, he passed his spoon through the steam and said, "Come spring, I'll need another pair of hands full-time." She looked over at him, brow raised. "I'd pay you fair, of course," he added. "But that's not the whole of it." She set her spoon down gently. "What else is it? It's that I don't want to find out what this place is without you." The room was still, save for the crackle of the logs and the hush of snow against the windows. Cora reached across the table, her fingers sliding over his. "Then maybe stop wondering, and no, I'm not leaving." He didn't answer, just turned his hand to hold hers fully, and for the first time since the road out of Red Hollow, she felt the weight of her name lighten. Cora Ashford, no longer a woman without place, but a woman claimed by something better than a town's judgment. She'd given her kindness without question and lost everything. Now she gave it again, and found a man waiting with both hands open. The wind shifted with November, colder and coarser coming off the mountains. Porter repaired the barn roof before the first heavy snow, and Cora stitched a quilt from salvaged flannel and worn shirts. Her needle steady through the evenings while the fire crackled low and the children drowsed. The rhythm of days thickened into something solid, chores shared without being asked, glances exchanged across the table that held more than words. There was no need to name what had taken root between them. It grew in the quiet, in the way their paths always bent toward one another without effort or design. One morning, Porter laid a parcel on the table after returning from town, wrapped in brown paper and tied with butcher's twine. "Traded for this at the mercantile," he said. "Figured you might make better use of it than I would." Cora untied the twine, fingers careful. Inside lay a folded length of clean muslin, 2 tin-top jars of carbolic, and a fresh roll of linen bandage. She looked up slowly. "You went to town for this?" "I went for salt and lamp oil," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "But I saw it and thought maybe you'd want something set aside, your own tools, your own place for that kind of work." She touched the muslin with her thumb. "I didn't expect, I know," he said. She folded the cloth back over the jar lids, her voice low. "I used to dream of a small room with a window and a table. Not much more than that. Just a place to tend to folks proper." Porter leaned back, stretching his legs. "There's space in the lean-to behind the house. We don't use it but for storage. Give it a coat of whitewash, move in a table, and it'd be yours." She let the silence stretch, then said, "I could teach Tally to read in there. Tobias, too, once he stops pretending he's not curious." Porter nodded. "They'd listen to you. They listen to you." He glanced toward the hearth where the children had left a trail of dried apple peels and a crooked pinecone figure. "They try mostly." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Cora stepped outside to shake out the quilt she'd finished. The stars were clear above, sharp against the black. Porter joined her, rubbing his hands together. "You ever miss it?" he asked. She turned toward him. "Miss what?" "Whatever life you had before all this. Before the wrong man showed up." She let the quilt settle over the rail. "I miss the idea of it. The version I thought I had. But I think that life was already gone before he came to my door." Porter looked out across the dark pasture. "I stayed in the war longer than I should have. Thought I'd be no use anywhere else by then." "I didn't know you served," she said. He nodded. "Tennessee Regiment. Infantry. I was 20 when I saw my first man die up close. Took me longer than it should have to stop flinching at thunder." She stepped closer, the cold brushing her skin through her shawl. "Do you still?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not as often now." They stood there a long while, the quiet between them not empty, but full of earned trust. "You built something good here," she said. "So did you." He turned toward her then, eyes steady. "I want you to know I didn't ask you to stay lightly. It wasn't about the chores or the help. I know that. I asked because I saw something in you I didn't think I'd see again. Not in this world, not for me." She didn't look away. "You saw hope. I saw someone who doesn't run from pain. Someone who stays, even when it's hard." Cora reached for his hand, slow and certain. "Then you saw yourself, too." He closed his fingers around hers. "I don't want to spend another winter alone." "You won't," she whispered. They didn't kiss then. They didn't have to. The closeness between them had already deepened into something sure. Not a spark, but a flame that would hold through the snow and the silence and the long, hard seasons still to come. Inside, The fire burned low, and the children stirred in their sleep. Outside, the first true snow began to fall, soft and steady, covering the earth in quiet promise. By mid-December, the lean-to behind the house had been scrubbed, whitewashed, and cleared of every rusted nail and broken crate. Porter built a narrow table from pine boards, sanded smooth at the edges. Cora lined the shelves with muslin, laid out her tools with care, and stitched a small curtain for the single window. When the wind blew through the cracks in the boards, she stuffed them with wool and packed mud, just as she'd once learned from an old woman near the Flint Hills. One day, as she trimmed dried yarrow for tincture, Tally appeared in the doorway, clutching a folded scrap of paper. "I wrote something," she said, eyes lowered. "Don't laugh." Cora set her shears aside and took the paper. The letters were uneven, but careful. "I like the way you talk," Tally said quietly. "You don't rush." Cora folded the note and tucked it into her apron pocket. "I like the way you think. You notice things others miss." Tally stepped back into the cold, her boots crunching over snow. Later that night, as Cora swept ash from the hearth, Porter carried in a sack of flour and set it beside the table. His coat was dusted white, the tips of his ears red with cold. "They've closed the pass," he said. "Won't be any mail until spring. Store's running lean, but I traded for molasses and coffee." She poured warm water into the basin. "You didn't need to do that." "I wanted to," he said. "You've kept this place running smoother than I ever did on my own." "I see it." She wrung out the cloth and wiped the table. "You ever think about what comes after winter?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think about planting oats where the grass lays thick. I think about teaching Tobias to fish once the ice breaks. And I think about asking you something real." She set the cloth down. "Then ask." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "My mother gave me this after my father died. Said it had been her mother's before her. I never saw a woman I'd trust it with." Cora opened the pouch slowly. Inside lay a ring, simple gold with a narrow green stone. "I can't give you a church or a preacher," Porter said. "But I can give you a home and a name that's mine to offer. I can give you days where no one questions your worth, and nights where you don't wake wondering where you belong." Cora didn't speak. She took his hand, turned it over, and placed the ring in his palm. "I don't need a preacher," she said. "Just you. And those 2 children who let me braid their hair and bandage their scrapes." He held her gaze. "Then you'll marry me?" She nodded once. "Yes, I will." They set the wedding for the following Sunday. Tobias fashioned a crown from winterberry and pine, and Tally pressed her best dress against the stove to smooth the wrinkles. Porter shaved, cut his own hair with a steady hand, and dug out a pressed shirt from the trunk beneath his bed. When the day arrived, they stood beneath the bare cottonwood by the creek, the children beside them. Cora wore a wool dress the color of storm clouds, and Porter held both her hands without shaking. "I don't need vows written in books," she said. "I just need you to know I'm staying. That I choose this." "I choose it too," Porter said. "Every day after this one." They kissed once, soft and certain, and the wind carried the sound of the creek through the still trees. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in the loft, Cora lit a single candle and sat on the edge of their bed. "You ever wonder if we might have missed each other?" she asked. Porter lay back, one arm behind his head. "I think we didn't. I think we found each other exactly when we were supposed to." He reached for her hand, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. "If I'd met you before the war, I wouldn't have been ready," he said. "Wouldn't have known what to do with someone like you." She leaned into him, her head against his chest. "And if I'd stayed in Red Hollow, I'd have never known what it meant to be chosen, not just needed." They lay together in the hush of the room, the candle flickering shadows across the walls, and the cold kept at bay by wool blankets and the warmth of skin against skin. Spring arrived with slow rains and green shoots pushing through thawed soil. Cora planted herbs behind the lean-to and taught Tobias how to fold bandages tight. Tally read aloud from a tattered reader Porter found in town. The children called her Ma without prompting, and Porter called her love in the quiet way a man does when the word means everything. They built a life from the pieces they carried: grief, grit, tenderness hard-earned. No one came looking for her. No one needed to. She had found what she never dared to name before, a place where the past no longer haunted, and a man who didn't ask her to forget it, only to let it rest. On the first warm evening of June, porter brought her a sprig of wild mint and tucked it behind her ear. "You're not running anymore," he said. She smiled and kissed him slow. "Neither are you." In the valley beyond Red Hollow, where the cattle roamed quiet and the wind curled through the grass like a lullaby, they lived out their days with purpose and peace. Not perfect, but whole. And holy together.